relentless.
Everyone claps when the stage lights blaze, but few know that behind those dazzling suits are empty stomachs and gnawing hunger. Music lifted them to the heights, but it also slammed them to the depths. In the world of musicians, 23 black faces once set stages ablaze, yet they endured long years of poverty, crushing debt, not to mention drugs, stray bullets, prison sentences, and relentless illness. Some sang their hearts out on street corners just for a full meal. Others lost everything in a single courtroom. Glory and poverty wrestled, tearing their fates apart. Yet they still stood on stage, flashing smiles amid storms of debt and chaos. Now, brace yourself before diving deep into their lives. You won't believe they once slept like the homeless, even as their music echoed through the streets. 23. Billie Holiday, music's angel who died with just 70 cents in her pocket. Billie Holiday left America speechless with her voice on Strange Fruit, a song that ripped bare the dark face of racism. From Harlem's dingy bars, Billie stepped onto grand stages, her name becoming a tear-stained jazz icon of the 20th century. But no one could have guessed her life was drowned in poverty, even at her peak. It all began in 1915, born into a cramped Philadelphia home. Father gone, mother slaving as a maid, still unable to afford a loaf of bread, while other kids hugged dolls. Billie dragged herself through Baltimore's slums, abused, stuck in foul brothels for a few coins. Nights curled up on iron beds, days scrubbing floors, evenings singing on streets for spare change. At 14, she was locked up for prostitution, the start of a humiliating chain with no end in sight. In the 1920s, she fled to Harlem, night after night. Billie sang under dim yellow lights, her voice stirring drunken crowds. Tips barely covered a rundown boarding house. Everyone loved her haunting voice, but no one heard her cry backstage. By the 1940s, when Strange Fruit echoed everywhere, Billie's pockets stayed empty. Promoters skimmed her pay, and she turned to drugs to escape reality. Earnings vanished into needles. Fame faded with every arrest. No big stage dared book an addict's shadow. In 1959, Billie lay dying in a hospital. No one could believe the jazz icon who brought the world to its knees had just 70 cents in her bank account. Her only hidden treasure was $750 clutched for a final hope. No home, no family. Friends scattered. Billie lived a legendary life, but her account was almost always empty. They say she died from addiction, but maybe Billie was slowly killed by the cruelty of a life in want. 22. Muddy Waters blues king stuck dead in the slums. Muddy Waters, the father of electric blues, was Chicago's backbone, breathing life into a generation of rock and roll. But behind his gritty guitar and cracked voice was a tattered childhood, a life exploited to his last breath. Muddy was born in Mississippi's swamps. His home was a rotting shack, bed-soaked when it rained. At 5, he stooped picking cotton, hands sticky with sap, earning pennies barely enough for a meal. Mother gone early. Muddy strummed a homemade guitar on the porch, eating whatever his grandma gave. No school, no teachers. He learned music with mud-caked ears. In the 1930s, he clung to Delta bars, singing for a shot of whiskey or a bowl of boiled beans. No cash, just a pack of smokes from bar owners, full one day, starving the next. But Muddy was stubborn, playing harder the poorer he got. In 1943, he scraped enough for a train to Chicago, dreaming of escaping misery. But the city was cruel. Days hauling cargo, driving trucks, back bent, nights in a crumbling apartment, rats scurrying late at night. He dragged his guitar to street corners, plugging into amps, pounding electric blues, hoping for tossed coins. Not until 1947 did Chess Records open a door. Muddy got a contract, stages but meager pay, singing till his voice broke, still poor. He performed in smoke-filled clubs, but fees only covered rent. Many nights, Muddy sat hunched in a moldy room, guitar in a corner, pockets empty, kids hungry under tattered blankets, sleeping to forget. Mornings hauling freight, evenings singing hoarse, never daring to rest. Crowds cheered, managers counted cash, while Muddy counted days without electricity. For years, Muddy Waters was called Chicago's Blues King, but he never owned a decent home. His life rolled through dust, rusted strings, debts, and sweaty delivery runs. Blues saved him from the swamp, but drowned him under stage lights, leaving him to die in a slum apartment. 21. Lead Belly, the wandering singer who killed, starved in icy New York, leaving a lone 12-string guitar. Lead Belly, the 12-string king, roared through bars and street corners. He made America shudder with songs of prison, freedom, and spilled blood. They called Lead Belly a living legend, a man hauling his guitar from Louisiana villages to New York, but fame couldn't free him from the poverty that clung since childhood. Lead Belly was born amid Louisiana's cotton fields. His home was a leaky tin roof, muddy floors. At 5, he weeded fields, picked cotton, scraping cents for his mom. School was forgotten. Music was his only grip. Learning from drunken drifters, he fumbled chords, tuned strings, sang alone, not yet grown. He left home, dragging his guitar across Texas, Louisiana, sleeping under bar awnings, eating tossed-out beans. Some nights, he curled up in parks, guitar as a pillow, stomach screaming. But his stubborn, unyielding fire led him down a dark path. Trouble seemed to wait at every turn. In 1915, a brawl landed him in jail for assault. That was just the start of darker years. In 1918, he killed a man in a fight, earning a longer sentence, thrust into a grim life behind bars. No lesson learned. He went back in 1930 for another violent clash. 3 times in prison, 3 times crossing crime's threshold, 3 times in cramped cells with stale food and heavy beatings as constant companions. Out of prison for the last time. Lead Belly hauled his guitar to New York. The shining city left him in its shadows. He sang in rundown coffee houses, paid with whiskey shots, cold fries. His boarding house leaked, blankets thin, winter biting to the bone, countless songs, countless mics. Yet his pockets stayed empty. Studio bosses pocketed cash, racism blocked big stages, no money for medicine, no coat for warmth. In 1949, ALS gnawed his breath. Lead Belly died in a freezing room, guitar abandoned by the bed, pockets bare. 20. Howlin Wolf blues legend who died in a filthy Chicago apartment. Howlin Wolf, one of blues giants, carried a generation's strength in every note. His growling voice and gripping stage presence made him a Chicago blues icon, inspiring thousands of artists. But behind the success was a life of hardship. From abandoned childhood to scraping by in rundown bars, surviving on next to nothing. Born in Mississippi's poverty, Howlin Wolf learned life had no room for weakness. At 13, kicked out by his mother for not being religious, he was left to wander with no shelter. The orphaned boy worked cotton fields, earning cents daily, living in a crumbling shack without power or water. Music dreams couldn't fit between grueling labor and hunger pangs. Nights. He sang in cheap bars, paid with a meal, no cash, but his stubborn grit pushed him forward. In the 1930s, he kept grinding, from Mississippi to Memphis. He lived a weary life, farming by day, guitar in hand at night for cash. Only in Chicago did he start recording, signing deals, but it wasn't easy. Despite his blues fame, he lived in Chicago's slums, working construction and odd jobs. His apartment was cramped, dark, barely better than homelessness. Even with record deals, he was exploited, paid peanuts, not enough to live. He ran endless shows, singing till he dropped, just to feed his family and survive. Yet Howlin Wolf stood tall. His voice, fierce as a storm, conquered the world, tragically, in his final years. He died in a grimy, bare apartment. His name echoed, but he never escaped poverty's shadow, living far below his worth. 19. B.B. King, guitar king who lived poor, died still owing rent. B.B. King is unforgettable in blues. He played guitar like he breathed, turning notes into heartbeats, touching listeners worldwide. Over 40 years on stage, called King of the Blues. He sold millions of records, leaving Lucille, his legendary guitar. But few know, behind the lights, he slogged through shows, hunched under debt, living and dying with a near-empty wallet. B.B. King was born in Mississippi, in a rickety wooden shack amid cotton fields. At 7, the black boy picked cotton from dawn to dusk, earning pennies for cornbread or thin gruel. Parents split. He lived with his grandma, more hungry days than full, clothes torn, feet bare, hands scratched by cotton thorns. School dropped. He clung to a guitar like a lifeline. Music saved him from dry fields. In the 1940s, B.B. drifted to Memphis, chasing a better life. The flashy city had no place for a country kid, days driving tractors, nights strumming on street corners, hoping for coins, sleeping in cheap boarding houses, walls stained, blankets thin, stomach growling. But B.B. was tougher than tough. He played everywhere: bus stops, markets, dive bars, rickety stages. In 1950, he signed with RPM Records. People thought he'd get rich, but measly fees got eaten by labels. With a big family, money never stretched. He ran hundreds of shows yearly, sometimes playing then driving all night, curled up asleep on bus seats. His whole life, B.B. King was a worker bee, guitar worn, frets scraping his hands, singing till his last breath. He died at 89 in 2015, still owing rent, leaving unpaid bills. He was the blues king on stage, playing for the world, but backstage, an old man counting coins for rent, meals, fearing the day he couldn't strum to pay debts. 18. John Lee Hooker, blues king who swallowed bitterness, wandered till he became legend. John Lee Hooker is immortal in blues, a man who sang his way out of poverty and pain, with raw guitar and deep voice. He left an indelible mark on music history, but before becoming a blues icon, he fought a grueling life where poverty and loneliness were his only companions. Born into a large, poor Mississippi family, in a rotting wooden shack, John Lee Hooker grew up with no schooling. He worked cotton fields, earning cents daily. Guitar was his only anchor, learned from wandering singers. At 14, he ran away, drifting through Memphis, Cincinnati. He shined shoes, cleaned houses, occasionally played tiny bars, paid with leftover food or tips. Life was hunger. No place called home. In the 1940s, he landed in Detroit, working steel factories, living in filthy slums, days of manual labor, nights strumming in small clubs for pennies, barely surviving. Even when his songs gained notice, label pay was pitiful, money scarce, clothes tattered, food sparse. Yet John Lee Hooker never quit. He kept singing, fighting an unfair life, not just for passion but to make his name known. He succeeded, but battled poverty and exploitation lifelong. Even as a blues legend, in his final years, he carried scars from past struggles, wounds that never healed. A legend, but a symbol of grit and pain. 17. Lightnin Hopkins, famed blues king, still starved. Lightnin Hopkins, a towering blues legend, brought fiery melodies to every note, but before the spotlight, he was a resilient kid fighting poverty. Born to a poor Texas farming family, Lightnin Hopkins knew no wealth. At 8, he worked cotton fields, herded cattle, earning cents in a shack without power or water. Food was scarce in a big family. Music was his only joy, learned from drifters. He played, dreaming of a better life, always out of reach. At 18, he left home, wandering Houston, busking on streets, bars, dance halls. Nights brought coins or scraps. Life was brutal. He was jailed for fighting, enduring harsh prison conditions, yet never gave up. Despite hardship, he carried his guitar, bringing music to Houston's alleys. In the 1940s, he signed with Aladdin Records, but pay barely sustained him. Though more famous, he played small bars, lived in rundown apartments. In the 1960s to 70s, a blues legend. He still faced financial woes, exploited by managers. Reckless spending kept him poor, often unable to pay rent. Despite fame, Lightnin Hopkins fought daily to survive, carrying lifelong pain. His image, guitar in hand, tied to poverty, remains etched in fans' hearts, part of his blues legend. 16. Robert Johnson, blues legend who died young, homeless in poverty. Robert Johnson, tied to blues myths, was said to have sold his soul for talent, but his life was a relentless chain of poverty, wandering, and unending pain. Born in a poor Mississippi family, in a crumbling shack, Robert Johnson grew up moving between plantations for his mother's work. From childhood, he picked cotton under scorching sun, earning cents daily. Poverty and hunger defined him. Music was his only hope. Not yet a teen, he left home, drifting Mississippi's delta. He played street corners, bars, small parties for coins, food, or a makeshift bed. No home. Life was a fight against want. By 1936, he recorded legends like Crossroad Blues, but nothing changed. Meager label pay didn't cover life. Though touching success, he stayed in cheap boarding houses, barely scraping by. A street artist's life never left him. From wandering to fame, Robert Johnson remained a broke man, no assets, no home. He died in 1938 at 27, possibly poisoned. Whatever the cause, one truth holds: his life was tied to immortal songs. But he left penniless, homeless. 15. Son House, forgotten blues legend, life sunk in darkness and poverty. Son House, tied to raw Southern blues, created haunting melodies, influencing giants like Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters. But his life was a long chain of poverty, shame, and wandering in shadows. Born in Riverton, Mississippi, in a poor farming family, Son House grew up in a tiny shack. No education, no childhood joys. From youth, he toiled in cotton fields, earning cents to help family, facing constant hunger. Those years shaped his musical soul but marked a thorny life. In 1928, tragedy struck. Son House was jailed for killing a man. It crushed his budding music career. After prison, he wandered Mississippi bars, streets, living in rundown boarding houses, paid with scraps to survive. Yet music kept him alive. His soulful, pained blues rang out, but couldn't heal his wounds. In the 1940s, he quit music, working railroads in New York. Life stayed poor, in cramped, bare apartments, low pay barely covering costs. In the 1960s, blues revival found him, but he lived simply, amassing no wealth despite renewed love. Health failing, show earnings too little, Son House died poor. His life wasn't glory but a tragedy of a forgotten legend. Revered by fans, he fought poverty daily, abandoned, never fully recognized in life. 14. Blind Lemon Jefferson, blind legend frozen dead on the street. Blind Lemon Jefferson, shaking Texas streets, was the father of Texas blues. His voice cut hearts. Guitar entranced crowds in the early 20th century. Yet his life was an open wound, exposing fame's dark side when it lands on the poor. Born blind in Coochman, Texas, Jefferson grew up in a creaky shack, no power, no school, before knowing guitars. He groped through fields picking cotton, earning cents for gruel, while kids played. He clung to an old guitar, self-taught, as a teen. He trudged Dallas's streets, bars, parties for cash, pennies bought bread or cheap boarding houses, reeking and cramped. When Paramount Records recorded him, people thought he'd rise, but his tracks filled streets. Money filled label pockets. Jefferson still dragged through Chicago's icy streets, guitar in hand, hat out for coins, blind. He never saw stage lights, never held enough to escape poverty. Boarding houses kicked him out when rent ran dry, leaving him on streets. Winter 1929 killed him. In Chicago's biting cold, Jefferson collapsed on a sidewalk. They say he froze, dead with no cash, no home, no proper coffin. Texas blues legend ended thus. Behind Paramount's bestsellers, Jefferson was a blind man, dragging through snow, clutching a guitar, leaving a wail in the wind, a grueling life, a freezing end. But his voice still moves the world. 13. Otis Redding, soul king, lost in a crash, gone before escaping poverty. Otis Redding, soul's explosive voice, set stages ablaze with Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, called the Soul King. He carried Southern sound worldwide, but behind the glory was a life never full, buried in a cold plane wreck. Otis grew up in Dawson, Georgia, in a cramped, run-down house. His preacher father and maid mother couldn't afford meals. At 10, Otis shined shoes, delivered papers, ran errands for cents to ease his parents' load. Older, he carried a guitar to make in street corners, dive bars, cheap dance halls, singing for hire, nights wandering, pockets empty on return. In the 50s, Otis stuck to small stages, running shows across Georgia, paid peanuts, earnings fed family. Some said without his voice, he'd be another black man toiling fields. By the early 60s, his voice erupted, charts listed him, crowds roared, but pay was slashed, contracts exploitative, money barely bought new shoes. Friends, kin leaned on him, he helped all, singing much, earning much, spending much. Otis never kept cash for himself. In 1967, as Sitting on the Dock of the Bay neared chart domination, Otis boarded a plane for more shows, hoping to clear debts, but it crashed into an icy lake, taking soul's greatest voice and his dream of a better life. Fans mourned, but his pockets stayed empty, household, debts waiting for survivors. glory dimmed, leaving an eternal song its owner never enjoyed in wealth. 12. Sam Cooke. Soul King died mysteriously, still shy of full pockets. Sam Cooke, with a honey-sweet soul voice, left millions spellbound with a change is gonna come, called the Soul King. He paved the way for black singers, but his life, barely rich, ended in broke mystery, with questions of unjust death lingering. Sam was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi. His home was a rotting tin roof, wobbly chairs, his preacher father and kitchen-bound mother scraped by. At 8, Sam sang in church choirs, begging for coins. Older, he hit Chicago, joining gospel groups, singing for hire, nights in slum apartments, days delivering goods for rice money. His voice soared, wallet stayed flat. In the 60s, Sam's soul broke from church, sweeping radios, studios, every song burned. Crowds bought tickets, records sold, but exploitative contracts gave him crumbs. Money fed parents, wife, kids, kin clinging to his wallet. Sam understood poverty's grip, having starved. He lived large, spent large, threw parties, gifted cars, funded friends' shows, but he rarely kept cash. In 1964, Sam fell in a seedy Los Angeles motel. A bullet ended the Soul King, sparking endless theories. Murder, they said, or a drunken fight. Truth sank with him. His funeral echoed with cries, but his safe was near empty. Soul's glory lived. A change is gonna come rang through streets, but Sam lay forever with unpaid debts. 11. Etta James, at last legend tossed to the streets for want. Etta James, the golden voice of At Last, tied to soul and R&B, captivated all. But stage lights couldn't pierce the dark corners encircling her life. Born in Los Angeles, her mother a prostitute, father unknown. Etta's childhood passed in slums, meal to meal, abused, shuffled between homes. As a teen, she sang in dive bars, scraping coins for food, but slick managers cleaned her out. In the 60s, At Last soared. Etta exploded, but her life sank into heroin's mud. Fees burned on needles, bills piled, landlords kicked her out. Years later, she was in and out of rehab, but couldn't shake addiction. As lights dimmed, At Last played on radios, while Etta huddled in cheap rooms, waiting for friends' spare change to survive. A legendary voice, but in the end, she drowned in debt and a past that wouldn't let go. 10. James Brown. Soul King once broke, sleeping at friends' homes. James Brown, the godfather of soul, owned hits like I Got You and Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, rocking stages. But behind the dazzle was a long slog of hardship and debt. Born in Barnwell, South Carolina, in a rotting shack without power or water. Parents split. James clung to an aunt's home, mixed in Augusta's brothels. At 7, he shined shoes, scavenged trash, picked cotton for cents. At 16, jailed for theft, stuck in cramped cells. Out, he sang in dive bars for dollar bills. Full one day, starving the next. Famous, money didn't stay. In the late 70s, he went broke, lost his home to bad management and addiction. Once the Soul King, James Brown knocked on friends' doors for a couch, dodging tax debts, buried in loans till the end. 9. Ray Charles, blind legend who slept on charity, borrowed to survive. Ray Charles, R&B master of Hit the Road Jack and Georgia on My Mind, conquered the world despite blind eyes. But his life was a dark, shaky trail, steeped in debt. Born in Albany, Georgia, in a crumbling shack, father gone, mother slaved. At 7, blind, Ray gathered firewood, begged cents to eat. Orphaned at 15, he drifted to Jacksonville, hauling a piano to bars, earning coins for meals, nights in cheap boarding houses, evicted when rent ran out. In the 50s, signed but still exploited, Ray ran shows across Seattle, Los Angeles, scraping to pay debts. Heroin dragged him deeper, pockets empty, friends slipping him cash, offering beds. Ray Charles, a musical genius, was a broke blind man backstage, clinging to gigs to live. 8. Little Richard, rock and roll king who slept on sidewalks, broke from exploitation. Little Richard sparked rock and roll with Tutti Frutti, shaking the world. But backstage, his life was steeped in shame, surrounded by debt and rejection. Born in Macon, Georgia, in a cramped house, siblings many, meals often bone over meat. His bootlegger father, penny-pinching mother. At 10, Richard shined shoes, sold papers, scraping cents for mom. In the 40s, he sang in bars, churches, for breakfast money, kicked out by family for being different. He slept under bridges, on Macon's freezing sidewalks. When Tutti Frutti hit, he thought he'd made it. But money flowed to promoters. Labels robbed him. Richard spent fast. Shows dried up. Debts grew. A legend. But he lived like a hired hand. Wrestling bills. Full one day, starving the next, even as his voice touched the heavens. 7. T-Bone Walker, electric guitar master who scraped streets for scraps. T-Bone Walker, hailed as the father of electric blues guitar, inspired legions. But behind his fiery strings was a childhood in Texas' tattered shacks. Parents split. T-Bone picked cotton, earning cents, always hungry, clothes torn, in his teens. He hauled a guitar through Dallas, playing bars, corners for bread or coins, signed, thinking he'd rise, but fees were slim, show to show. In the 40s, 50s, drained. He played Los Angeles, sleeping in cramped rooms, scraping for medicine as health failed. Pneumonia took him down in his final bed. No cash for a proper funeral. T-Bone Walker lit blues for the world, but closed his life empty-handed in a cold grave. 6. Bo Diddley, rock rhythm king, stripped to nothing. Bo Diddley, hailed as rock and roll's rhythm master, inspired Elvis and the Stones, but he grew up in Chicago's slums. Childhood tied to shoe-shine boxes and newsstands. At 10, he earned cents for bread. In the 40s, 50s, he hauled a guitar through streets, dive bars, days as a construction worker, nights singing for coins, signed with chess records, thinking he'd make it. But his hit Bo Diddley filled America while his pockets stayed bare. Money fed family. Friends drained him at times. Bo begged for gigs to feed his wife, kids. He left a legendary rhythm but struggled for daily cash. 5. Marvin Gaye, love song genius, bled dry to nothing. Marvin Gaye, golden voice of what's going on, moved America with timeless love songs. But behind the stage, he slogged through unbelievable want. Born in Washington, D.C., in a cramped house, hungry, beaten by his father through childhood. At 10, he delivered papers for cents. In the 50s, 60s, he drifted to Detroit, singing doo-wop in cheap bars, washing dishes by day. What's going on soared, but cocaine, costly divorces, and taxes sank him. In 1976, Marvin went broke, lost his home, fled to Europe dodging debts. In his final years, he lived in rented rooms, singing to scrape by. Fallen in 1984, he left immortal songs but an empty wallet. 4. Tupac Shakur, rap legend trapped in poverty and violence. Tupac Shakur, rap's defiant icon, left earth-shaking tracks but a torn life of poverty and violence. Born in East Harlem, raised in slums, everything scarce. His mother tangled with the Black Panthers, jailed often. At 12, he delivered goods for cents, slept in filthy boarding houses. In the 80s, he drifted to Baltimore, California, sleeping in parks, eating off friends, rapping on corners for bread money. In the 90s, big contracts came, but pay barely sustained. Arrests for fights, legal fees piled, money burned on lawyers. Tupac died at 25 in 1996, leaving a vast musical legacy but no cash. Amid sky-high rap, he stayed broke. 3. The Notorious B.I.G, Brooklyn's rap king, tragic end with empty pockets. The Notorious B.I.G, East Coast rap's ruler, made Brooklyn hold its breath with explosive flow. But behind the stage was a Biggie in rags, pockets bare. Born in Brooklyn, father gone. Mother struggled, meals short, in a moldy apartment. 10-year-old Biggie delivered papers, sold odds for cents as a teen. He dealt drugs on Bedford-Stuyvesant corners, slept in cheap boarding houses, evicted for unpaid rent. In the 90s, signed with Bad Boy. His rap shook the skies, records sold millions. But money trickled. He paid for friends, family. Legal woes ate cash. In 1997, Biggie died at 24. His funeral roared, but he left nothing. A rap king, ended in gunsmoke and unpaid debts. 2. DMX, roaring rap king, finished penniless. DMX made the rap world bow with Rough Riders' anthem, but behind the glory was a battered life with no escape. Born in Mount Vernon, New York, raised by a single mom, everything lacking. His childhood was Yonkers streets, nights curled on park benches, begging friends for a couch. At 10, he scrubbed, worked odd jobs to eat. Older, he rapped on streets, scraping coins for meals. Hits sold millions. But life didn't improve. Money burned on addiction. Legal troubles swarmed. In 2013, DMX went broke, lost his home, lived off friends, taxes, lawyer fees ate all. By 2020 he was down, scraping in rented rooms, health crashing. In 2021 DMX passed, leaving golden hits but no assets. The rap king fell in a cold end, like the benches he slept on as a kid. One R. Kelly, R&B king who slid into debt and scandal. R. Kelly shook the world with I Believe I Can Fly, his voice earning millions in awards. But behind the grand stage was a battered Chicago childhood, raised in slums, single mom, many siblings, food scarce. At 10, Kelly shined shoes, sold papers, collecting cents for his mom. As a teen, he carried a mic to Chicago streets, singing for tips, sleeping in cheap boarding houses, dodging violence. Life was so rough he once took a bullet but couldn't afford proper bandages. Rich from hits. Money didn't stay. Burned by loud lawsuits, lawyer fees, tax fines. In 2018, Kelly went broke, lost his home, lived off friends, recent years, stuck in scandalous allegations, pushed him to utter ruin. A once dazzling star, now too broke for a corner room. R. Kelly flew high, then crashed to nothing. Behind melodies that drove the world wild are lives torn, wrung dry to their last breath. They sang to fuel dreams of a better life, but the more they sang, the deeper they sank into debt, addiction, prison. Fame didn't save them from pain, it pushed them into deeper pits. How do you feel about these stars' lives? Drop a comment below if you want more stories of artists' lives. Don't forget to subscribe now. Plenty of dark corners behind the stage lights await in the next videos.